How are
Hey,
you?
good. How are you?
Awesome, awesome. So excited to have you here. We're talking about managing teams during COVID-19 and beyond. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to head over to Facebook so we can share this post and make sure some of your fans can see us. So we're going to go to the Sacred Fire Creative page, and I am not on there, so I've got to navigate around a little bit. And then if you scroll down to this post, and you'll see a little live button or banner, you can share that one. So
There
let me
we
know
are.
if you found it. You found it?
I found it.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so I'm going to do the same sharing. Okay. You have a couple places to share it?
I am. We are good to go.
Awesome. So do you have different like Facebook groups and different pages, or just your personal and your business page?
So my personal my business page, and then I also am an admin in another group, and then we have our NABO group. So there's all sorts of places that I can shoot this out and share it in.
Yeah, actually, I should share it to the NABO group. I didn't even think about that. So you are part of NABO, so I'm going to share it to our NABO Oregon page so they get a chance to meet you. Yeah. Um, yeah, let's see. Do it. Sorry about this. NABO. Well, I can do it to NABO chapter leaders. Are you a chapter
There,
leader?
or even the regular NABO one.
NABO. All I have is, well, I'll do NABO Oregon.
Perfect.
It's in our group, so
Yay.
awesome. Yay. All right, so we're talking about managing teams. Where do you want to start with that?
I think I will start with a story. How about that?
Sounds great.
So one of my clients was sharing a story of her daughter with me and how frustrated her daughter is because her daughter needs to bounce ideas off of people to feel comfortable moving forward. So it isn't that she is looking for input necessarily from people. It's just she just needs to verbalize them.
Right.
And now that she's not now that she's working from home and she doesn't have that interaction around her, she's getting super frustrated because she's feeling stuck and is actually losing confidence. Where before she was very confident in her ideas, she just wanted to share it. And now, because she has no one to verbalize it to, she's not taking action as easily.
Oh, wow.
And right, which is kind of a weird distinction. But so when I think about managing teams, whether you're home or you're not at home, it's understanding the personalities, excuse me, of the people in your group and what they need from you. And so she was very secure and very productive. And then the change in environment has caused her to second guess herself a lot.
Interesting. So yeah, last time we kind of ended, we were talking about bringing up DISC, and you're a DISC facilitator, trainer, and there are a lot of different forms of personality guidelines and things like that. They're very helpful, not only in business, but also personal. And I know that some of the ones I've studied also are more geared towards products that you buy because of marketing. So it's kind of like the marketing side of things. But what kind of input or advice do you have for somebody who's in that situation where they're used to bouncing ideas off of other people? I mean, are they just getting on social media? Are they picking up the phone? Are they Zooming? What's happening?
Right. Well, and so I think if you're looking at it from the perspective of the manager, you just want to be aware of your people. and where are their strengths, where are their challenges. And so if we jump back to what you just said, Molly, about DISC, really quick version of everything DISC, so simplified. However, that being said, think of it as 4 different quadrants. And so if you're above the line, you tend to be more fast paced. And if you're below the line, you tend to be more cautious and reflective. And then if you're to the right of the line, of the vertical line, you tend to definitely be more people focused, warm and accepting. And if you're to the left of the line, you tend to be more data driven, definitely more task oriented typically, and more skeptical. And so wherever you are, 75% of the people aren't.
Right.
So like you think about it, it's evenly distributed amongst the 4 quadrants. So in this case, if we're looking at this person, she's a verbal processor, which tends and is usually quick to act, very much around people. And so that usually would put her in that upper right quadrant, and she doesn't have that anymore. And so what you want to do with those types of people is help support them by giving them ways to check in. And her supervisor is about opposite of where she is. So her supervisor doesn't need a lot of people to check in, doesn't necessarily move super quickly, things like that. And so back to exactly what you asked me was, what can we do to support them? Have some check-in calls where people just get on and brainstorm. Like keep them kind of loosely structured. It doesn't have to be a tight agenda, just kind of what's going on with you, because in the conversation is where the challenges will come up. And they may not come up on a very highly regimented, highly agendaed get together. Or at least if you have a structured agenda, leave space in it for people to just share what's going on with them, the challenges that they're having.
So is that when you have people who are in that quadrant, or is that kind of like a good rule of thumb overall? Because inevitably you'll have people from all different quadrants.
Yeah, good, excellent, great question. So if you think about it's good to have your team check in all the time. Absolutely 100% it's good to have your team check in. You want to think about though how often and how that looks. So for example, if someone is in that lower left quadrant, they are probably embracing the fact that there's not a lot of people around them while they work, because they are very, they like to work in, I don't want to say in isolation in a bad way, but they like to dig in and work without distraction. So if you are doing a bunch of check-in calls, you're interrupting their flow. And so they're not finding them as helpful. However, that being said, if you're that type of person who likes to dig in and work and you've delegated to other people, your tendency is to think out of sight, out of mind, everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing. That is not the reality, especially not right now. Think about what's happening at people's homes now. Right? You've got kids, you've got spouses, like there's all this stuff happening. And so if you think, oh yeah, I delegated to this person, they're going to come back in 2 weeks and it's going to be perfectly done, that is unrealistic.
Wow. This is interesting because I knew that we were talking about this topic, but just yesterday, I had this deep conversation with one of my accountability partners and colleagues, and it's exactly about what you're talking about. So is there a way that we can kind of back up and break down more about those codes or the different personality types, and talking about, what each of them may need in a team environment?
Absolutely. So if we look at that upper left corner, that's your D corner, those people are, they'll say in Wiley Disc, they'll say they're dominant. Those are your drivers, the people who are very driven, the people who are very focused on the end result. They don't necessarily spend a lot of time on the steps in the middle. They have the idea, they want it completed, but they may not put the pieces together in the middle. They are very exacting, and they assume everyone has the same high standards that they do, and that when people are left to their own devices, they will get the work done, because that's how they are.
Right.
And so the way that those people need to be supported is they like things to move fast paced, which means they actually need check-ins coming. They need to be able to check in with people because they're just assuming everyone's getting it done. They also struggle at this time to delegate because, again, that same thing, they're assuming people are doing it and they're not checking in. So they need the check-in to make sure everyone else is progressing forward.
So this is, I feel like tagging my friend in this, because this is exactly, you know who you are. You're watching this. I have a lot of clients and friends who are dominant and who have this exact scenario going on. So some of the tools that we use to kind of overcome some of the obstacles with checking in, or, you know, that kind of accountability, are Slack or Asana or Monday. So some of those kinds of tools where allows people to check in, but also have some flexibility as to what, you know, when they're describing what they're doing. Are there other tools that you'd recommend or things that you use?
You know what? I love Asana and Slack. I think those are two great tools. And if you're not, let's say your office space isn't using those for whatever reason, email will work. A shared document in Google Drive will work. A document Dropbox, you know, like there are other options that, I don't want to say low or tech, but that are just as easy to access.
I mean, I think email is definitely lower tech. You know, it's just really easy to use. Everybody knows how to use it. You don't have to learn anything new. You don't have to log into anything different. So it's very accessible.
Yeah, and I think that when we're talking about the people in the D quadrant, they are, when people are out of their sight, because it's that feeling of out of sight, out of mind, they must be doing their stuff. But then they start to think, oh, maybe they're not. Like, this is where micromanaging happens like crazy for Ds, is when they are separated from their people. And one of the strategies that will help with these check-in meetings is it can just be one line on the agenda. Like, it doesn't have to all be only for this. Like, it can just be a piece where you just say, what did you accomplish yesterday? What are you looking to accomplish today? And how can I help? Like, it can be that simple. What have you done? What are you going to do? How can I help? And then you in there. So those are your Ds. If we move around the quadrants, if we go to the upper right, these people are still super fast paced, but they tend to be more accepting and warm. So they tend to be more people. And so they are, a lot of times they're influencers, and they're the type of people who have 50 ideas before breakfast. They can get people rallied around them. They are the ones who, when morale is low, they can get people going. And this can be hard for them right now, because they thrive off of people. Check-in calls a good reason for check-in calls for them. One is to make sure that they're still focused on the priorities, because they, again, 50 ideas before breakfast. Like, I wish I had that. You know, and so it's easier for them to follow a shiny object that could turn out to be exceptionally fruitful, but could also leave some of the things on their plate behind a little bit. So there's that balance. They will really appreciate water cooler time, or happy hour time, or, you know, a lunch together. One of my clients just sent gift cards out to a restaurant local to everyone, so that they could have they could pick up food and they could have a lunch together.
Yeah.
And they were all eating at the same time. So, like, she brought in food for her team. She happens to manage a lot of people who have a lot of characteristics of those of the I style.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's important.
those are the types of things that I miss the most. I mean, just like that simple, like you said, like water cooler talk. I even miss that from corporate, you know. So, but I really feel like, yeah, it's just that eating with people, connecting, just having a coffee together. I try to simulate it here in our Zooms, but there's that slight lag. So sometimes we're like talking at the same time. Sorry, but it's similar. Try to like make it as similar as possible, but at the same time, there's just that ease, and it happens all the time. As you're walking by, kind of thing, or all the serendipity that happens because you're in the building.
Right. I mean, there's something about being in the same space. Absolutely. And I find that, or one of the things that's helpful is on Slack, if you have a channel that's just water cooler.
Yes.
And then you can pop your random stuff there and it doesn't clutter up a lot of the other pieces. So those who don't appreciate that aren't annoyed by all of that going on. But scheduling those times in for people to just hang out and be, that's one of the great strengths someone who has a lot of I tendencies brings to the table is they are connectors and they can get the pulse of the room really well. And it's also important to recognize that we all have tendencies of all of the 4 quadrants. We all have tendencies of a D, and I, and S, and C. Because some are stronger than others.
Do you see this on the screen?
Hey, Margaret!
Hi, Margaret! Yay! I'm so glad you're here. Margaret, yay! Okay, she's also she loves the water cooler channel. Yep. Hi, Margaret. What are you up to today? Send in some questions for us. We're talking about managing teams and working in teams, especially remotely during COVID-19. We're also talking about DISC personalities, and I always find it fascinating. So we're going to just diving into each one. So thanks for joining us.
Yay, Margaret.
Yeah, she's like, yes.
Hey, so if we go around the quadrants, if we're down in the lower right quadrant now, those are your S's. Those people are steady. And if we think about the I, they're like the I in the fact that they love, they're warm, they're accepting and warm, but they also tend to be a little slower paced. And so these are the people that make sure everyone is included. They're great at consensus building. And what they find by being alone is they can usually dig in really well and work really well. However, they tend not to ask for help. And so the advantage of checking in with them regularly is to come right out and say, what can we do to support you? Not, do you need anything? Because do you need anything is yes, no, and they are going to say no. But if you ask, what can we do to support you? They will, and ask it a couple times to get, because in this time, this is your group that will definitely show some burnout because they are saying yes to everyone. They are helping everyone, and they're not necessarily helping themselves.
Awesome. So Margaret says we're 100% virtual team, and she's with the NABO team. But we can be better about connecting. Yeah. I mean, it's showing us, especially now that we're virtual with everyone, not just the ones that we were already virtual with, that just getting to connect more. And then Margaret saying, I need to take the DISC assessment. I don't remember my results. I remember mine. I don't want to reveal them though. Anyway, so, and then.
But if you think Margaret, you know Molly's results, put them in the chat.
I don't know I don't necessarily know. That was a long time ago. I could be totally different, right? Okay. Great question. I need to implement this. Aw, thanks so much
and
for chatting.
Margaret, later, and Molly, you also, I am happy I'll shoot you a code and you guys can take this. So I'll shoot you an access code. We can do that later. I'm going to write it down so I remember.
I think steady. So you're talking about steady, and that is definitely my husband. He's like the rock, so he's very steady. If you're watching right now, hi. I feel like, yeah, he just like makes sure that we're like going where we need to go. And so I just really
right, exactly. And supportive, and yes. When we flip around to the bottom left corner, those are your C's, those are conscientious. Those people, like the S's, are a little slower to act. And like the D's, those are the people who are more skeptical, more data driven, things like that. And so this group are embracing the working from home right now.
Wait,
They love,
C?
I'm sorry?
Which one is this?
C, so conscientious.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah,
So this group is loving the working from home piece because they can work uninterrupted. They can dig in and, and work on details to their heart's content. So one of the challenges then for them is that they don't have those D's and I's hanging around to move them a little quicker. So they can get caught in the details. They can start to grab some of those perfectionist tendencies. So a great reason to check in with people who have C tendencies is just to check on their progress, because whatever they've done, it's right. They just might not be as far as long as they would be if you were in the group and had some of that external talk. So you definitely, there's value in checking in with all of your people. It's just the way that it looks could be a little different for each person. So someone who has a lot of C tendencies is going to be annoyed if all the check-ins are water cooler stuff. Someone like they're going to be like, why did you pull me away from my work so that we could talk about our dogs? Whereas someone with a lot of I tendencies will be really frustrated if all of the meeting is a report out on every project that we're at and where people are and what's coming next. So having a good balance of all of those always at a meeting is vital. Right now, when you're lacking a lot of the typical face-to-face time, is again super important.
So, and then I have a different question. Sorry. I know that, so DISC is actually, it's very well known around the world and it goes deep. I mean, we're just like barely touching on the surface.
So high level, yes.
Please reach out to Lisa if you're interested in that, if you want to take your team through it, of course. I'm definitely interested in that. But also, the question I had was just about the check-ins. Okay, so like I said, this has been the topic. So yesterday we were talking about this, or maybe it's Monday. And is there a rule of thumb? I mean, how do you know how often to check in with your team? I do weekly and daily check-ins, and sometimes I'm feeling like, wow, I do daily check-ins. That's is that obsessive, or is that like, don't do that?
No, like, have I crossed the line? So my answer, is going to shock you. My answer is it depends.
Yeah.
It depends on your people.
Yeah.
It depends on their personalities. It depends on their needs. It depends on what you're doing. Someone I admire very much in the business community, they do daily check-ins every morning.
Yeah.
And their check-in is part of a celebration of, they have their dashboard out, they have their metrics, they check in on their metrics, they check in around the room, what did we do, what are we doing next? And then something like a one word about how they're feeling. So it's hitting all of the styles. It's also keeping their eyes focused on the goal. So I think there's a piece of like short check-ins to make sure people are focused could be helpful. It also may be with your team that maybe you co-create what that looks like as a team. And you just talk and say, okay, how often do you think we need to check in? How long? What do you want the structure to be? They are as invested, if not more so, in that process as you are. So being able to co-create that is definitely going to be helpful. And like Margaret says, she's the opposite of a micromanager.
Yeah.
So having people take the initiative to check in with Margaret may be helpful to make sure things are still moving forward, because Margaret, it seems as this is kind of the out of sight, out of mind. I'm going to assume you're doing your job unless I hear otherwise. And so that may work. And if you find out it's not, then maybe a check-in every week would be helpful. You have to take the pulse.
Yeah. And then, I'm not sure which one you're referring to here, but she says that is so hard for me. I need more of it. So,
so I'm guessing it might be just checking in general.
Okay.
And so, really, Malee, it's about you talking with your team. What do they need? The other piece I want to talk about is if this isn't enough, as if the idea of let's make sure we do check-ins and let's figure out how to bring in all 4 styles in our check-in so everyone's supported isn't enough. You also want to think about the time of day, meaning everyone has a peak time and a low time.
Yeah.
And you don't want to match a check-in with people's peak time because that's the time that they're going to do their best work.
Right. Well, and also it's not just about one type of peak time. I find that I have certain peak times that are for reflection or, the big picture thinking versus getting every little task done and getting the details taken care of, just like running everything like that. So to me, those are totally different times.
Absolutely.
And as far as checking in, I think that, I've just been like learning along the way what works with my team and what they need to be successful. So, some of them it's once a week, some of them it's every day. And I think that, and it shows it's just, that's what works. And then Margaret, I don't know about you or if you are watching live, I see there's quite a few people. Definitely give us some hearts. And then also, if you can type in how often you have check-ins with your team, if you are managing teams, or if you have questions about managing your teams for Lisa, then just let us know. You can type them in the comments under Sacred Fire Creative, and we'll be able to bring them up on the screen. Awesome.
Yay. I had someone ask me once, you're talking about managing teams. I thought you do time management work. Like, how is that connected? So I want to draw the bridge for all of you watching now so you can see, why would we want to worry about how well we manage teams? And it is all about saving time and being more effective and more efficient. Because when your team works well together, everything gets done so much easier and so much faster. When they're feeling unsupported, like the story we talked about at the very beginning, she's struggling because she doesn't have anyone to bounce ideas off of, even though she has the right ideas and she can totally implement them. Her confidence is taking a hit, which means it's taking longer. And so I always think about when you're working with people, when they are in an environment where they feel 100% supported, they are just going to work better with each other and independently, which just makes it easier all the way around.
Nice. And thanks, Margaret. She says she chimes in weekly with her team. So she's got the check-ins and absolutely, we're self-motivated, and that's partially why you, Margaret, Lisa, and I are here. So we're self-motivated. We know that our people sometimes need the leadership, need some accountability.
Right.
Need that checking in. So, yeah, definitely. I see the correlation too. So I just put here the managing teams, time management. Obviously, they are connected also because you're much more conscious of what you're doing with your time and what you're doing with your teams during their time.
Right.
Or the time that you have together. So, awesome.
Right.
What other tips, what are your top, you mentioned some stories and, DISC and making sure that you're taking into account personalities. What are your other, top tips when it comes to managing teams, especially during COVID-19?
Mm-hmm. So I think one is the check-in piece that we've definitely been talking about, figuring out when's the right time to check in, or what do you want your check-ins to look like? When's the right time to check in? The other thing is to figure out what's realistic. The work that they were able to produce in February is going to be different than the work that they were able to produce now. even if they have always worked from home, even if they don't have any distractions. Let's say their physical environment has not changed. Mentally, there's a lot of uncertainty, and that affects us all.
Yes.
Whether your business is busier than it's ever been, or not very busy at all, or somewhere in the middle, there is still that uncertainty of what's happening around us. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's very important to have conversations with direct communication. Always if my answer isn't, it depends, the answer is direct communication when it talks about working in teams. Like, it's one of those two things. And it's having that conversation. You don't know. Maybe their mother's, uncle's, sister's friend is ill. And that happens to really affect them in some way, even though you would never, ever know that it's a thing. Maybe they're worried because their husband is still, this is my case here. My husband is considered an essential worker. He's going to work every day. Kind of freaks me out a little. And so I know that affects my productivity and what I'm able to handle effectively. And so having that conversation with people, what's realistic?
Right.
In an 8-hour day, we're happy when we get 3 hours of really high productive activity in general, because you can't just sustain your focus for a long period of time over 3 hours. It just, there's a reason why you do mindless, easy tasks part-time in the day. It's because your brain has said, I've had enough. And so maybe all you can hope is to get 3 solid hours out of your people for right now. But having those conversations is super important.
So, and Margaret brings up a good point. She says they're just really worried about the world. And, in a way, this is something that I've heard, that we are all going through this global trauma. Okay, so we're going through a global trauma, and the way that people handle trauma is different, individual by individual, and day by day, and minute by minute. So where they are in that stage of trauma, or how they're being affected, or what's going on in their life is definitely something to look at. We're not necessarily qualified counselors or anything, and so there's no point where we're taking that on. So I just want to be clear about that. That's something that I've seen that is kind of pushing some people into burnout. So I don't want to see that. I want to be sure that you're providing the resources for your employees to get help, or you are allowing them to have the space to deal with the trauma in this way that that they're dealing with it, right? So being compassionate and empathetic, and realizing, okay, this isn't the most effective time in their lives, and with good reason, right? So
right, and knowing these are people. I always, someone asked me, what's your best advice right now? I was be a good human. Right now more than ever, let's lean into our resources. Let's lean into our support systems, and let's be good humans. Let's have a little grace. And it comes back to direct communication. Ask people what's going on. And a lot of times that's best done face to face, than by Slack or by text message, or have that honest human conversation, regardless what of the 4 quadrants you're in. Have a conversation with a human and see where they're at. So I think those are, when I look at what are the things right now, it's checking in with your people, both just in general to keep things moving and support them through their work style, but it's also checking in with them as humans. And then it's giving them the support they need. So you just alluded to, if they need some support from a mental health perspective, hook them up with those resources. Mm-hmm. If they need support from a professional organizer because they're trying to figure out how to set their office up, hook them up with that resource. There's so many resources out there, even if they're not, there's 1,000 free resources out there too. So you don't always have to look for, a paid resource. The other piece is people struggle right now with distractions. We've already alluded to the distractions in your head. You're worried about the world. There's a lot going on, but help them create structure so that they can work uninterrupted for a period of time. One of my clients has a red and green thing on her door Red means stop. It also means unless there's blood, don't come in. And green means it's okay to interrupt me. And, and she has run her business that way. And she says it's funny because when the kids were younger, it was so easy. She goes, now they're in college and high school and they blow right past the red and green. And we had to do a whole retraining for them on what that meant. But like help figure out, what are the common distractions you're facing and how do you, support them in managing those distractions?
Awesome. Thank you, Margaret, too. She says, I'm all about grace with myself and people.
Yes.
And, and we were just talking about being good humans and helping your team manage their distractions. What are some things that now during COVID-19 you want to be conscious of that maybe weren't true before about managing teams? Do you see things that come up that, okay, this is completely different. I think you mentioned some of it, that we're all going through this trauma. We need to have a bit more grace. We need to, give people a little more room with this trauma that they're going through, however they're experiencing it, and honor that about them. What other things are you seeing about managing teams that is different now during COVID-19 than previously?
I think we're finding broken systems are popping up, meaning, maybe you weren't the most skilled salesperson, but because you had a lot of leads, it didn't really matter that your skill set wasn't that great because you converted enough and it was okay.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden the funnel's a little less full and you're still converting at the same percentage, but it's more noticeable that there's a skill set that could be increased. So I think we're finding where things are broken. Even if we look really, really, really big picture, the PPP program, and like all of a sudden we're like, oh, our technology systems aren't really equipped to handle this mass influx that we're receiving. And so we're noticing that around, I'm noticing that with managing teams too, is that all of a sudden we're finding that maybe this person worked really well in this setting, but it turns out they're not as efficient as we thought they were when they're on their own because they can't lean into the support of other people that were helping them along the way. So we're finding inefficiencies. On the flip to that, we're finding people who are more creative thinkers, more independent thinkers, because they were once in this box of this is how it is, this is how we are going to do it. And now that box has been blown wide open. And they're coming up with really interesting and different solutions. So I think, what we're finding specifically now is what we knew 2 months ago to be true isn't true. Yeah. It's just what we thought had to be.
Right.
And now we're in a place where, things are a little different.
So, and I like this. Margaret says, we're using this time to update systems. And I find that true about a lot of my clients right now. And I feel like, the phone is ringing off the hook because, like you said, they're seeing the broken system. So they're seeing their funnels kind of dry up, or kind of the writing on the wall. Like, okay, we used to have this clear funnel a certain way, and now that's no longer happening. And now we need you because, you got to make this miracle happen right now. So, that's definitely happening. And I can see it's partially a panic because we're realizing that everybody needs to pivot. Everybody does. And if you aren't, you're going to get left behind, whether that's in terms of technology and using the technology, or in terms of seeing what's happening around you with either your competition or your colleagues and not making movements in the right direction, right? So, this is kind of the thing I see. And I think that it's a good point that right now is a really good time to look at your systems, making sure that they're going to work even during, difficult times, even during a pandemic, even during a recession, right? And that you can still manage the teams, make sure that you are showing them your leadership and that it's an opportunity, right? I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an
I
opportunity.
think
Yeah.
I just got an email maybe last week from Sharon DeLay from Go HR, and she listed like all these opportunities for training that were free or low
Yes.
cost. Like if you're behind on sexual harassment training, now's a great time to get that in. If you've always wanted your workforce to be able to do whatever, now could be the perfect time to get that in if you're in that space where things are a little slower.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in that phase where things are even faster, now is the time to grab systems, because otherwise you are spinning over and over and over again. So one of the things that I recommend is just do some sort of screen share software. Don't sit there and try to recreate the system on paper. Just capture it as you go, and then let someone else clean it up a little bit. But now's the time to do that.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I know that with that said, I feel like we're all busy. We have a lot to do. Really appreciate you joining us today. And thank you everybody who's watching live and also on the replay. My Margaret says my space feels faster. Awesome, awesome. And so, Lisa, are there any other things you want to just add before we wrap up today?
I think we covered the idea all the way around the disc circle and how to manage teams. I think we did a good job, Molly.
Awesome. And I know that we just kind of touched on the disc, and if you didn't catch the beginning part of it, go ahead and feel free to watch the beginning of this interview. And we're going to be back again next week because we never run out of topics, and I never run out of questions. It's just part of the deal.
You have the best questions.
So thanks so much for joining us. Thank you, Lisa. We're going to stay here and chat so we can figure out the time for next week. But thank you all for joining us. Bye.